speak straight through her, directly to the hearts and the minds of each and every one here. And I just pray that the words would flow, and we just thank you for her heart, for her continued steadfastness in you, Father, in Jesus' mighty name.
Well, good morning, church. Good morning. I would love to start by asking Andy if he could help me read the key text for today, which is Matthew 14, verse 22 to 23. Give me just a wee second here.
I haven't got my glasses, so it's gonna be a tough read. Okay, adjust. Okay, so this is Jesus walks on the water. So immediately after this, Jesus. Oh gosh, I'm really struggling with this. Sorry. Can you make it a bit bigger? Can you make it a bit bigger? Oh yeah, that's. Oh yes, this is good. Hey, he sees the light. Okay. Immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and cross to the other side of the lake while he sent the people home. After sending them home, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. Night fell while he was there alone. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. That still blows my mind. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified, and in their fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost!" But Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage. I am here." Then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you, walking on the water." "Yes, come," Jesus said. So Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. "Save me, Lord," he shouted. Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. "You have so little faith," Jesus says. "Why did you doubt me?" How many verses we do? Just the end there, yeah. Jesus immediately said, "Why did you doubt me?" When they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped, and then the disciples worshipped him. "You really are the Son of God," they exclaimed.
Oh, thank you, Andy. I don't know if this is meant to be working. Can you hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Andy. I would like to, if the team in the back can help me with the first part of the video, if that's okay. Just for the technical stuff. There's a dodgy guy on tactical today, so just bear with me. He happens to be my husband, the dodgy guy. But they're doing great. We believe they're doing great. Or we choose to believe they're doing great. I think it's coming, guys. I think I'm gonna start. In the meantime, you sort it out, if that's okay. Huh? Sorry, my love. I forgive you. No dinner for me today.
So today we're going to be talking about those moments in life where life feels like that boat the disciples were on. And I would like for you to imagine what that was like. This was a storm, and it wasn't fun. It was scary. It was pouring, and there was strong winds and possibly thunders, which happen to be very common in Costa Rica. I'm very used to them. And something that has caught my attention here in Ireland is that I've only heard it once. And it was quite random because it's not very common here. But they can be scary. They are loud and they can be disorienting. And when it comes to those storms of life, they can symbolically make it hard to hear God's voice. We can feel like we're sinking when we're in those situations. And I believe we are tempted to believe that we will drown. It is easy to believe that we will drown, that God is just there kind of just looking and doing anything or doing nothing about it. So I would like for you to raise your hand if you have never have been through any of those moments, if you have had the blessing of a pain-free life. Anyone? No. Exactly. Loss is universal. It's one of those things that connects us as humans, and probably one of the most human experiences we can all have. We all walk through valleys, and even though we would like to skip them, because as I said, they are not fun, they are ugly, they are uncomfortable, I believe they are necessary in our lives. But most importantly, they are expected. Because Jesus said that in this life, in this world, we would have trouble. So we should not, and we hear this oftentimes, that we should not be surprised when these times come. Because he promised, like it's probably not one of those very nice promises, but he did promise that we would have trouble. So we are to expect them. He himself went through sufferings from the moment he was born into this world, I believe, to the moment he was hanging on that cross, bleeding for our sins. He knows what suffering is like. So why do we run away from these moments of pain and suffering? Why is it that we are so used to want to avoid them, to want to avoid pain, to want to numb the pain, or just ignore it? And whenever something happens, just pretend it's not happening and not deal with the situation. I think Jesus discovered that there was a glory in the pain. He understood that there was a reward in pain that could not be brought if not through pain and suffering. And my prayer for us today is that we will understand that revelation will fall into our hearts, into our minds, in our understanding, and that we will be able to embrace that just the same way Jesus did. Could we maybe show the video now?
No, it's just going to be in the presentation.
Okay. So I was just wanting to show you guys a video from the TV series The Chosen. They themselves have a disclaimer in the beginning of each episode where they say that some of the things they present are biblical based or Bible based, but not all of it. And they added these little, parts, or they have these little add-ups in order for us to imagine how things really were back then and in the things that we read through Scripture. So I was watching this episode just like a week ago with Neil, and I was really touched by it because I had already decided what I was going to talk about today. God had already shown me that this was what he wanted for today. But there's this moment in which, and just to give context, in this imaginary aspect of the series, Peter is going through some trials in his personal life. And he was having probably a faith crisis, and he was questioning Jesus and Jesus's intentions, and he was just trying to make sense of things, which I think we all try to do when these moments of life come. We try to make sense of them. And so, as we already read, they are in the storm, and they see Jesus coming, and they get scared. They think it's a ghost. And then Peter says, if it's you, call me to walk on the water towards you, right? And I just want us to keep that little line of if it's you present throughout the rest of the teaching, if that's okay. I would like to start sharing a little bit about my own suffering. And yeah, we are like 2 weeks away from becoming a year married, which it's been a beautiful thing. And God He has definitely been in it. Yeah, it's something I always dreamt with, and it's one of those promises fulfilled that I have personally seen God in my life. However, we got married in November, and I didn't have a working visa. I only had like a partner visa, so I was waiting for that second part of the visa to come through. And so you would imagine that then I was pretty much forced to be stuck in the house for almost 3 months. So from November to around February time, I didn't have much going on. It all came down to being the wife and just waiting for Neil to come home and cook. And I started to really struggle with how things were playing out, because sometimes we have an idea of how something is going to be like, and it turns to be completely different, or just not what we expected or what we thought it would be. So I had lived in different countries, and because of that, I kind of thought I had it all figured out when I moved here. I was like, it can't be any hotter, you know, like I've already lived away from home, away from my family, already been through this situation of like getting adapted to a new culture and whatever you want, right? I was so wrong. It just wasn't what I thought. And it was challenging. It has been challenging in many ways, and maybe disappointing, because that was also another dream that I had for a long time. I traveled when I was very young, and since that moment, I thought I am not meant to be in Costa Rica. Costa Rica is not home for me. I don't belong here. And I knew that my life wasn't gonna be in Costa Rica. One of those things, I just knew it. So when Neil and I met, it was like, in one of our first conversations, he pretty much told me, like, if you want this to work out, just know that life for me is here. So he set the tone, and I knew it. But then when he said that, I was like, sure, I already knew that I was gonna live in a different country. And you can imagine the weather was challenging, or has been challenging. I come from a tropical country, beautiful and warm and green like here. But I think we can probably see the green more than you can here as it gets disturbed by the clouds, right, and the rain. But it was just very different. In the beginning, I remember also struggling with the accent. I have spoken English since I was like 14, and I suddenly felt like I couldn't. I didn't want to go out on my own without Neil, because he would literally have to pretty much interpret what people were saying, because I didn't understand. And for the lack of better words, I felt a little stupid. I didn't understand people, you know, so people would say something and I would just be like, and just look at Neil, you know. And it was really frustrating. You can imagine how frustrating it can be to want to maybe talk to people, you know, and start making connections and stuff, but you just don't understand them. So there was a lot going on. And I would like to make a little note here that I believe the spiritual atmosphere was a big, big component of the challenges that I was facing and that I have faced in my first year living here. I think sometimes when we are like when we belong to a place, we are a little unaware of things, and that includes the spiritual reality. But as someone that is not from here, that has come to this country, I can tell you guys, there's really dark stuff that moves in the atmosphere of this country, unfortunately. And I have felt the weight of it. So it was emotional, what I was going through, was spiritual, and it was physical, because on the 2nd of December, only a month after we got married, we found out that we were pregnant. And physically, it was very, very difficult. I was extremely sick. I was sick every day. I couldn't work, so I was already at home, but then I ended up spending like 2 months in my bed. I couldn't move, I couldn't do anything, and it was pretty miserable. That wasn't on the picture. It's not like we got married and we said like, all right, let's get pregnant just a month after, our wedding. But that's the way it happened. And even though it wasn't necessarily expected, of course it brought all the things that the news of a baby can bring. For those who are parents would understand, and for those who are not, or at least not yet, you are just completely scared, and you don't know how you're gonna do it, and it's just so intimidating, and it changes your life. But then I was, of course, also excited, and we started dreaming. However, on January the 28th, on our 12-week scan, when we were meant to hear our baby's heart, we showed up at the hospital, and we were in an ultrasound room. And when I looked at the monitor, expecting to see the little silhouette of my baby, the nurse couldn't find anything, and she couldn't find a heartbeat neither. And those were one of the hardest words that I have ever heard. There is no heartbeat. There's nothing that can prepare you for that. It's like an ice bucket thrown at you in that moment. And we definitely felt like the floor, the ground we were standing on was just being removed, and we were falling on a pit. So we already said and stated that loss, suffering, storms, pain, whatever you want to call it, is gonna come. It's a part of our human experience. But now I would like to suggest that challenges our faith too. And we can see some examples. We can start running the presentation. In case you didn't read the title of it, it's called The Glory of Loss, Finding the Gems of Suffering. And I really hope that's what we can do throughout this teaching, that we will be able to find the gems of suffering. So, yeah, we already saw the reality of loss. Next one. You're doing great, Bambito. Yeah, so we can find a few different examples, if not many, throughout Scripture. One of them being Job, and maybe if you have never heard about him, he lost everything. And sometimes you know how it's so easy for us to exaggerate and say like, oh, I have nothing to wear, or, oh, you always say that, you know? No, he lost everything. He literally did. He lost his family, his properties, probably even his sense of worth, his sense of security. And I want to say he was probably tempted, as I said in the beginning, to lose his faith too. Where was God? Why is this happening? And then we have David as well. He suffered the consequences of his own sin, and that brought suffering to his life. But there was also other situations in which it wasn't maybe necessarily his fault. Things just came to his life, and he experienced pain, and we can see throughout the Psalms that he cries out from a place of sorrow. But something we need to remember when it comes to this topic is that questioning is not the opposite of faith. It's just part of the journey. We can see these men of God. David was, we all know, he's referred to as a man after God's own heart. And he doubted. He questioned. So it's not something that we have, not even have to skip from the process, but it's part of the journey, it's part of the healing, and it's part of finding God, and part of just the journey of faith. So loss can definitely bring questions. Where is God? Why is this happening to me? Or why now? I think, however, the most important question, in my opinion, that these storms makes us ask is, who is God? Or who is Jesus? And as Peter asked, that's why I asked you to keep that in mind, is he really who he says he is? Peter told Jesus, if it's really you, call me to walk on the water. Help me walk in faith. Help me do something that humanly is impossible. Humanly, I cannot walk on water. But if it's you that's calling me, then maybe I can. And that's what faith does. I remember many years ago when I was 20, I was very young. I was in a long-term Christian relationship, and I was being the role model in my home church, and everything was flowers and butterflies pretty much. And we got engaged, but it didn't last long, and only a few months later, he called it off, I think that's how you say it. And it was devastating, to say the least. For a long time, I remember I used to say that was one of the hardest things I ever went through, because it triggered a lot of lies that I had believed about myself, but most importantly, about God. So I remember for the first months after the breakup, I tried to just keep, moving forward and keep on holding on to God and believing and kind of going like, God, you're worthy of my trust and you're still good, and I believe there's something in this. They say nervousness makes you thirsty. So, yeah, there was questions, and there was things that I believed about God that weren't necessarily true. And that's something that can happen through these seasons of life. For a while, as I said, I was able to hold on to God after this breakup. But then it didn't take long for me to just kind of go like, okay, this actually makes no sense. Like, I was doing everything right. I was choosing marriage in a society that wants marriage and family every time less and less. And so this just makes no sense. This was a Christian guy, and if a Christian guy does this and it hurts me this way, what's the difference with someone from the world, right? And I decided to leave the church and drop all things God. And I got angry with God, and I walked away from him for a few years. However, he was faithful and kind and merciful enough to bring me back to him. And when he did that, we actually sorted that last event out. And I realized that there was things that I had believed about God that weren't true. And maybe even a gospel that I believed that wasn't the true gospel. These things that Christians are so also tempted to believe, that if we say yes to God, then he's going to be with us, and then bad things won't happen to us, or bad things don't happen to good people. Well, they do. So there's lies that we can believe about God when storms come. Just as I said, if God is good, then these bad things should not be happening to me. That's an example of one. But then there's things that he actually does promise when it comes to suffering. Things like, I'm going to be with you every day until the end of the world. That includes those hard days. And these moments of life reveal those things that we believe about God. And it does have the potential of making us walk away from him or deepening and growing our faith. So yes, loss challenges faith. It brings us to our knees. It makes us question. Job questioned. David wept. And after our miscarriage, I wasn't quoting Bible verses. I was yelling in the car. I remember when we left the appointment and just being so devastated. I have to say that when I mentioned the difficulties that I was going through in those first months of the year, I didn't mention that it got so bad that I had to face one of my biggest fears of acknowledging that I had depression again. I had dealt with it in the past, and it's something that God had and has bring healing for. So I was always so afraid of saying like, okay, I'm depressed again, like I'm officially depressed. And there has been moments after that healing journey where I've been like kind of going down, but then I would have said like, oh, I'm getting depressive. But I didn't want to say I'm depressed. That was like a big deal for me. And one day when I was already pregnant, I remember telling Neil with tears in my eyes, I don't want to live. And I wasn't necessarily suicidal, but I was completely hopeless. The life that was in front of me just didn't make sense. And I was trying to make it make sense, but I was failing big time at it. It just wasn't. So when the miscarriage happened, we get in the car and I was crying. And I just remember having this question in my soul. And I yelled at God and I asked him, what does this mean? How is this supposed to help? I was like, okay, God, like I am already in a pretty bad place. Like, thank you? Why are you doing this right now? How is this supposed to help? This is only getting worse. And they say it only gets worse before it gets better. I would like for us to start believing that, because that's where the message is going to land. So Peter doubted as well, and still God showed up. Jesus didn't walk away from him when he doubted, when he said, if it's you, but he came closer to him. And that's what God does. He comes close to us in our pain. He is present in our loss. And we can jump to the next point. He is present in our loss. On Psalm 56:8 says, you keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book. And I honestly love these types of passages, because we can maybe easily find some passages about God's justice, and God's power, which are all aspects of who he is. But I love these ones because there's just such a powerful thing about acknowledging that God is a tender God, that he's sweet. In fact, I was telling Neil this morning before the service started that when I got up this morning, I tried to take at least a little bit of time at home to pray and just kind of get spiritually prepared for the preach. and I went on Psalm 107, and literally the second verse says, "Has the Lord redeemed you? Then speak out. Tell others he has redeemed you from your enemies." And this is part of what we're gonna see today, that there is redemption after loss, after pain. So I just found it, I told Neil, God is so cute. That was literally the words I used. He is so cute because he knew what I was gonna teach today, and he knew, of course, that I was feeling nervous. I was actually very nervous throughout the week. I was close to having a meltdown, and I was even gonna make a joke in the beginning that then I ended up not making, because I was like, I'm actually feeling more secure that you're with me. But I was gonna put this on, and I was gonna tell you guys that I was gonna preach with this and pretend that you weren't here because I was so nervous. So it wasn't necessarily, because God is present, and he does show up for us. But he is so sweet. There is a sweetness and a tenderness to him. In John 11, we find the story of whenever Jesus' friend Lazarus died. He was very close to him and his sisters. These were his friends. And we can read that he weeps with Martha and with Mary. That space between what you hoped for and what actually happened, that's where lament is found. Can you think about those difficult times? Can you think about what was that one thing that you were expecting or hoping for? In my case, this year, I was hoping that moving to this country would be easier, and it just wasn't. And when we found out we were pregnant, of course I was hoping to be able to give birth to my baby and meet my baby on this side of heaven. But that's not what happened. And that's where we find lament. Jesus, by crying, he's acknowledging, by crying with them, he's acknowledging, this hurts, this matters, and therefore I will feel the pain. So I would like to ask you, if the Son of God in his humanity dared to weep with us humans, what makes us think that we should just over-spiritualize whenever we're going through these times and just kind of go like, it's something that can be so easily done. God has a plan. Oh, God knows why everything happens. Everything happens for a reason. And while there's truth in that, we can often use those phrases and those responses when we are suffering ourselves or someone near us is suffering to just get rid of the pain. And that is not necessarily healthy. If Jesus cried in front of pain, if he showed weakness, that tells us something about the right way of facing pain. Jesus knew that resurrection was coming. It's not like Jesus was like, Lazarus died, like what now? Oh, I know, I'm gonna resurrect him. No, like the moment he found out he died, he knew he was going to resurrect him. He knew what was coming. But he still entered in their pain and in his own pain. So we don't need to over-spiritualize loss and pain. The fact that Jesus weeps with humans, I think also allows us to see that he doesn't rush out of pain and that we don't need to rush out of pain. I think sometimes when we're going through these seasons, we can also feel like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be suffering for this anymore. It's been a year, you know? And while there's something about that could be addressed, I remember a lady that I met back in Costa Rica. She lost her son, and by no means I would suggest that was easy. That's actually against nature. Like, parents are not meant to bury their children. It's meant to be the other way around. So I can imagine how devastating that was. If I experienced such a pain by losing my child that I didn't get to physically see or hold in my physical arms, I cannot imagine what it is like to say goodbye to your son and all the memories and all the love that was found in those years that you spent with him. But I also remember that for years and years and years, and I think even as of today, is if I was to go on her Facebook, she posts all the time about how difficult it has been and about how God has sustained her. And I don't mean to be judgmental in any way, but I think that when we really mean that God has been faithful, it needs to come with a tone of, he has actually been faithful. Not like, it's been so difficult, but God has been faithful. Do you know what I mean? And so there's something about the timing of our lament and our grief and doing it in a healthy way. We could do something like her maybe and just extend it and maybe sometimes even victimize ourselves, which is not necessarily what God wants from us. So faith is not pretending that we're not hurting. It means that we are trusting while we're hurting, because he understands pain. I remember that the day after we found out about the miscarriage, the day we found out, I didn't want to know anything about God. Like my response in the car tells you already so much about how I was feeling. I was like, this makes no sense, and I don't want to hear from you. I don't want to talk to you, and I don't want you to talk to me, kind of thing, you know. I was like, I don't want to see you right now. And God is also so, you know, they say such a gentleman, but he really is, because he doesn't force his way into our pain. We need to allow him. And sometimes he's so good that he will find the way for us to let him in, but he doesn't necessarily force it. And so I remember I was crying and asking all these questions of thinking, remembering the times we prayed at night before going to bed, asking him to help our baby develop. And on this phone app that we have, we would have seen every little organ that was developing that week. So if it was, I don't know, the intestines or whatever, I don't know, we would have prayed like, God, we just pray that they can be developed the right way, that they will be healthy, that our baby's growing strong. And I remember telling Neil, crying, what was he doing when we were praying those things? If he already knew our baby was dead, because we had what it's called, medically called a missed miscarriage, which is you don't realize, your body doesn't show that you've miscarried until you go to have an ultrasound and then you see there's no heartbeat. But your body didn't know. My body thought I was still pregnant. So I thought that was absolutely cruel. What was he doing when this mom was asking him to protect and take care of her baby? That seemed cruel. But at some point, I was reminded of other hard seasons that I've been through and how his comfort is just like anything else, or like nothing else, sorry. And crying, I told him, God, I can't see you. I really can't see you right now. But if I can hear you, I know I can make it through this. I don't need to see you. I don't need to know where you are. I just beg you that you allow me to hear you. I need to hear your voice. Because if I'm walking in the darkness and I can't see, but I can hear your voice guiding me, then I know I can make it to the other side. If I can hear you're on the other side, and I can follow that voice, then I know I'll be fine. And there is something about willingly allowing God into our pain. Is about those moments. The other part of the video that I was wanting to show is once Peter finally comes to Jesus, and then he starts sinking, and like he actually goes underwater, and he thinks he's gonna die. And then Jesus shows up and holds him. And then Peter starts crying and he says, "Don't let me go. Don't let me go." And Peter keeps repeating that so many times throughout that scene. And I just felt so related with that prayer that I had made of, I don't care if I can't see you, but let me hear you. That was my way of asking God, don't let me go. Don't let me go. And if I can tell you guys, in these moments and this year, there's been more than once I have wished to skip the pain, to skip the hardship. It's just not nice. But when I can find the presence of God exactly in my pain, and I can have those sweet encounters, just like that scene that unfortunately we're not gonna be able to see, but where Jesus holds you in his arms and you're begging him, don't let me go. Those are the moments that cannot be replaced in any other season of life, not even on the mountaintops. There's just such a sweetness and such a tenderness in these moments. And nobody can take that away from you. That is, in fact, what is going to help you walk through the next storm. Because when you remember that you have been through that and what he has done and how he has shown up, how you have felt and experienced his presence and his embrace, then you will know that he really is who he says he is. Remember what Peter said? We can go on the next slide. He said, if it's really you. Oh, I was meant to share those photos when I was, we went to, that was the waiting room when the next day after we found out about the miscarriage, and just for protocol, you have to get like 3 ultrasounds done because they need to make super sure that what they're seeing is right. And we were waiting there just to hear again that, yeah, that in fact our baby was gone. And I was numb. And at that point, I was still kind of like, God, I don't want you too near. Like, it's okay if you start coming a little near, but I don't want you too near. And he really did respect that, guys. I don't know how to describe it, but he was so gentle that week right after the horrible news. And I remember sitting there. It was only the 2 of us in that waiting room or in that waiting area. And those empty seats, I literally felt how he was sitting there with us. And he didn't, it was just so sweet. I just felt how he came and sat down, and he knew I didn't want to hear much about him, but I just felt him saying, I'm here. And that's all I needed to know, that he was there. And that rainbow there, excuse me, we saw it on the day of the news. We saw that rainbow on the day of the news on our way home. We were actually going to the North Coast. We decided we were going to go to the North Coast and just kind of like, you know, get a little air. But in case you don't know, rainbows represent God's faithfulness. So when I saw that right in front of our car, and it was right in the middle, like right in the middle of the road, it was right in front of me, it was God reminding me, I am still faithful. I will not leave you. I will not forsake you. So there's been something about valleys that as much as I have wished myself to skip and maybe have like a magical, fast forward button or something, I've been learning in my almost 30 years of life that what I have obtained in those places, I wouldn't replace. I wouldn't want to replace. Because it's in those moments that I have discovered that he really is who he says he is. Can we go on the next slide, please? Next one. Thank you. So faith is refined in the fire. On Romans 5:3-5 says that suffering produces perseverance, character, and hope. And God uses those circumstances to shape us, to deepen our trust, for our spiritual maturity, and for our own growth. So when we see Peter doubting, if it's really you, call me to walk on the water. He doubted, but then something that I was so excited to find while I was studying for the sermon is that on Matthew 16, verse 15-17. Sorry, I didn't have that one, but I actually really want to read it. Things take a turn. Matthew 16. So that's only 2 chapters ahead of what we read in the beginning. And it says, Jesus, this is talking about Jesus to Peter. Then he asked, to the disciples. Then he asked them, but who do you say I am? People say many things about God. Church says things about God. We sing things about God. I recently heard that Christians don't tell lies, they only sing them. And something I love about worship is that it's also been through worship in these moments of suffering that I've been able to, with all my heart, just hold on to what he says he is. And listening to worship songs, hearing, you're faithful and I'm gonna make it through this. And all those things really pump your faith up. So listen to worship when you're going through difficult times. But then it says, Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. What a powerful confession and what a powerful understanding Peter had obtained by going through that moment of questioning. Are you really who you say you are? It was through the storm that Peter's faith was strengthened and that brought him to a point of being able to say, you really are who you say you are. And those are some names of God that I chose that go well to remember when we're going through times of difficulty. And that we're going to be able to strengthen our faith and our belief in the fact that he is a father. If maybe, this is actually very personal to me. I didn't grow up with a dad. And God has shown up as my father in moments of need. A little super quick testimony. I'm sharing a lot of stories today, I know. But I just love to share what God has done in my life. I think we all should be excited about what he has done in our lives. Last year when we were planning our wedding, we were trying to do a low-budget wedding. And I was very obsessed and fixed with having video and photography. I didn't want to negotiate neither of them. But then my husband, and because he's a boy, and boys sometimes don't necessarily see things like us girls, he wasn't quite understanding why they were both so important. But they were. Maybe you get it, maybe you don't get it. And one day we almost fell out because he was just like, no, we just don't have the money. Videography is like 2,500 pounds. That's the average price. And I was nearly cried. And I was like, okay. You know what? I don't have a dad that I can go to and say like, hey, can you cover this for the wedding? I don't have a dad around me, but I have one in heaven, and I'm gonna ask him because I'm his daughter, and I know he cares for me. And in fact, I went and I prayed. And literally the next day, when we were on the call, because we were still doing long distance, I was in Costa Rica. We are on the call and you're like, baby, I need to thank you for helping me grow my faith. Because you said you were gonna ask your Abba for that video that you wanted for the wedding. And guess what? Someone is giving it to us. So I have learned through those moments of need, and that's only an example, but I have learned throughout life, my own life, that he is my father. He really is. He's mine. I don't know if he's yours, but he is mine. He is my father. And he shows up for me. that he is El Roi, the God who sees. When he sat down next to us in that waiting room, he was telling me, I see you. I know what you're going through. That he is Emmanuel, God with us. That he is Jehovah Jireh, the Lord our provider. How are we going to ever learn and actually believe with all our being that he is Jehovah Jireh if we don't go through times of need? If maybe you don't lose your job and you're like, okay, God, like if you don't do something right now to provide for our food or to pay for rent or whatever it is, how are we going to ever really believe and experience that aspect of his character? That he is Jehovah Nisi, the Lord our banner, which means that he's our protector, our victory. If we're going maybe through a time where someone is like saying lies about us and they're trying to, I don't know, put our reputation down in some way at work or something like that, how are we going to lean onto that Jehovah Nisi, the banner, the protector, and the victorious God? Jehovah Rapha, the Lord our healer, if we don't go through sickness. Jehovah Shalom, the Lord is peace. If we don't go through the storm, which by the way, Jesus ended up bringing peace and calling that storm to come to peace because he has the power to do that. And I'm gonna tell you, sometimes he won't necessarily stop the storm around you, but he can stop the storm that goes on in here. He might not change the circumstances, but he does have the power to bring peace to the storm that arises in here. And finally, Jehovah Shammah, the Lord is there. He is there. He truly is there. We see on 1 Peter, we haven't shown the verses, but I don't know if we can do it. No? Okay. Never mind. But on 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 6 to 7, I'm going to read it, guys. It says, so be truly glad. There is wonderful joy ahead, even though you must endure many trials for a little while. These trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold. Though your faith is far more precious than mere gold. So when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world. I think one of the ways in which our faith is refined in these seasons, in these moments of life, is a little bit what I shared in the beginning of like bringing out the lies that we believed about God and helping us place our faith where it actually should go. So even though we already heard that pain and suffering is part of this life, we cannot skip it, and that it is challenged whenever we go through those times, and that it does refine our faith in God. It doesn't have to stay in a sad story. God doesn't always remove the pain, as I just said, but he does redeem it. And this passage started to touch a little bit about that. It says, glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world. There will come a day when Jesus will come on the clouds and we will see him as the governor and the king, that he is above all things, above every storm. And that brings us to this last point, that is, there is a hope that goes beyond our loss. Romans 8:17 through 18 says, and since we are children, we are his heirs. In fact, together with Christ, we are heirs of God's glory. But if we are to share his glory, we must also share his suffering. Yet, what we suffer now is nothing compared to the glory he will reveal to us later. I remember a certain time in my life that I was, again, going through some sort of unnice things, ugly things. And I read this and I was like, God, if I could only live a lifestyle where my eyes are fixed on that glory, on that eternity, and as the Bible says, on things above, my journey on this earth would be so much different. And that's something we need to remember, that we are not here permanently. The Bible says that we're pilgrims. Is that the right way to say that? Yeah? And we're foreigners in the world. This is not the end. There is something more, something else that is coming, that is resurrection and is restoration and it's eternity. In Revelation 21:4 says, there's a beautiful, powerful promise that says that there will be no more death, there will be no more mourning, there will be no more crying or pain. I remember hearing a speaker adding other things that belong to this fallen world. There will be no more bills to pay, there will be no more sickness, there will be no more broken relationships, there will be no more broken hearts, there will be no more trauma. There will be no more of that, any of that. So loss in this life is real, but so is the eternal promise of restoration. And I think this is the most significant part of my testimony, or our testimony, about losing our baby. Even though there was toys that she didn't get to use, and so many things that we dreamt we would do with her, even though there was an album that I couldn't fill with her photos. I was in the hospital room waiting to go into my D&C. And again, God met me there. And he started to show me. He reminded me that one of my biggest fears, even before becoming a mom, was for my children to ever go through the trauma and the neglect that I went through myself as a little girl. And just being absolutely terrified of that. And he reminded me how much I wished to bring my kids into a safe home and to just change the story. And it was right in the last moments of holding my baby in my womb that he started to show me the redemption that he had brought in the midst of the pain. And that's why loss is all about perspective. If we allow God to give us his perspective. And he said, Nia, you didn't get to carry her in your arms here, but I actually redeemed your family line because she was the first one in a few generations to be born in covenant, in a marriage of a man and a woman that absolutely love each other. She was the first one in generations to come into a safe home where she was wanted and expected and protected. She did get to experience that mom that you wish to have, that would have done anything to keep you safe. You became that mom through this. You didn't want to lose your baby, and you would have done anything to keep her safe. That happened, even in the loss. No more trauma. She only knew love. And the moment I understood that, I could do nothing else but worship. Because what a holy and sublime revelation that was. that even in what seemed like death and loss and like it was the end, he was like, no, I still brought redemption. I still brought restoration. I still brought healing to your family line. I still changed things. That is the God. That is the God we serve. So let's wrap it up. It's okay to grieve. Grieving well isn't a detour from healing, but is healing in itself. It's okay to ask questions. We don't need to pretend with God. He sees us, he knows us, and he walks with us. And a few takeaways, if I was to give you any today, that we can show on the next slide. That was me in the hospital bed. Thank you for the late photo. Let yourself grieve. Don't run out of grief. Don't run out of pain. Honestly, there's things, I already said it, but I will reinforce it. There's things that you can experience firsthand about God in your own life that nobody else will tell you, but you will experience it only through loss, only through those moments where he meets you. Bring your raw emotions to God. Don't try to fake it. Bring your questions, bring your raw questions. As raw as that one that I said, what was God doing when I was asking him to help my baby grow healthy in my womb? What was he doing? That was cruel. I said that to God because that's how I was feeling. And if I didn't say it, he knew it already. He knew that was in my head. So be real with him. Keep your eyes on the one who promises to restore, redeem, and walk with you. Whatever it is you're going through, or whatever it is you have been through, or you will go through, he has the power to redeem. And he will ultimately redeem. That's what we need to hold on to. That even if we don't see the redemption on this side of heaven, ultimate redemption is coming. There will be no more tears. And if you keep crying on this space called earth, you won't cry anymore when he fulfills each one of the prophecies. And let's carry one another's burdens. That's extremely important. So this week, maybe take intentional steps towards healing and don't stay isolated. I would suggest to you that if there's something that you haven't processed, you write a lament prayer and you get real with God on it. Or you talk to someone about a loss or a hardship that you haven't talked about, that you haven't processed. And it can be scary, I know. But it is healing. And there's so much beauty in doing that. Or maybe listen to someone about a loss that they haven't processed. Sit down and be there. Another great, super practical tool is meditate on the Psalms. Whenever you're going through these seasons, or if you're going through one of them right now, Psalms, morning, afternoon, evening, they will strengthen you and you will feel related. Try to show up for someone else's grief. If you see someone in pain around you, don't let them on their own. So I would like to finalize with communion. And through communion, as the body of Christ, broken with our own brokenness, let's remember his resurrection. That is our ultimate source of hope. Maybe we can play some music and you can serve yourselves. I'm just going to start quickly praying before you do that. Yeah, God, thank you so much Thank you so much because you are near and you are real and you are alive. Thank you that you're not a distant God, a distant Father, that you're not like our own heavenly fathers for those who have had not a good one, but you're tender and kind, and you're invested in our lives, in your children's lives, and you care about our pain. Thank you for that, God. I pray that we will be able to connect through your Spirit, and that you will bring a deep, strong revelation that cannot be shaken, that anything we go through in this world will be ultimately redeemed. We thank you for the hope we have in Jesus. Thank you, Jesus, for your blood that was shed for us. Thank you because it is the blood that changes everything. May the blood and may the revelation of that hope and that future restoration change the way in we see things, change the way in which we talk, change the way in which we worship, and even change the way in which we sing. May the way we do all those things reflect that we actually believe that you are who you say you are. In Jesus' mighty name.